So, um, I want you to imagine standing at the port of Fujita.
Okay.
You're not just looking at traditional oil tankers anymore.
Yeah.
You are looking at the foundational node of this massive multi-billion-dollar rail and sea corridor.
Right. A corridor designed to bypass some of the world's most vulnerable maritime choke points.
Exactly. I mean, connecting Mumbai directly to the Mediterranean,
Hmm.
we are tracking a really staggering evolution in this deep dive.
We really are.
We're looking at a relationship that started as a $180 million transactional trade loop back in the 1970s,
Mhm.
and it has morphed into a structural $100 billion comprehensive partnership.
It's a completely different paradigm now.
Yeah, so today we are unpacking the strategic evolution of India-UAE relations, and our mission is to take the provided international relations text, break down the structural logic, drill the data, and basically build out the exact geopolitical implications you need to master this topic.
Right. And the qualitative shift in this bilateral dynamic is, oh, well, it's the core analytical framework we have to establish right away. The UAE cannot be viewed simply as a gas station or, a destination for labor anymore. I mean, you have to think of the UAE as a geopolitical router.
Oh, I like that analogy. A router.
Yeah, just like a router takes your internet connection and strategically beams it to different devices. The UAE is taking India's trade capacity, its energy demands, and its strategic footprint and routing them across the Middle East, Africa, and Europe.
Wow, yeah.
We're examining a multi-domain partnership that is fundamentally altering the strategic geography of the Indian Ocean region.
So we have a lot of ground to cover to build those cause and effect chains. We'll be constructing the mental frameworks you need to synthesize this information efficiently for your exams.
Absolutely.
We are going to divide this strategic briefing into three core pillars. First, the economic and demographic foundations.
Right.
Then we look at how that massive economic density forces the creation of a heavy security and defense architecture.
Because you have to protect it.
Exactly. And finally, we zoom out to the macro level to see how those two pillars enable a vast geopolitical connectivity strategy. So let's just jump right in and dig into the foundational bedrock, the economics, and the demographics.
So to really grasp the scale of the current $100 billion partnership, we have to establish the historical baseline.
Right. Where did we start?
Well, while India and the region have millennia-old cultural and social ties, based on the Dow trade across the Arabian Sea, the formal, modern institutional relationship really kicks off post-1971.
Because that year marks the creation of the UAE Federation.
Exactly. And when we look at the data from the 1970s, bilateral trade was valued at a mere $180 million per annum.
I mean, $180 million. In the context of global trade, that is essentially a rounding error.
Yeah, a drop in the bucket.
And it was purely transactional, right? Like we bought their hydrocarbons, they bought our food and basic agricultural commodities.
Very straightforward buyer-seller dynamic.
Right. But you compare that $180 million baseline to the figure we have for the financial year 2024-2025. Bilateral trade reached roughly $100.05 billion.
Which is just a massive explosion in scale.
Yeah, that single figure makes the UAE one of India's absolute largest trading partners globally. Now, the text points to a very specific trigger event for this recent massive surge, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or CEPA.
Right.
Hitting that $100 billion target under the CEPA is a monumental shift. But how does a trade agreement actually force that kind of scale up so quickly?
Well, the CEPA is the mechanical engine, sure, but the root causes driving both nations to sign it are deeply structural.
Okay.
I mean, this isn't just organic, slow-burn market growth. For the UAE, the root cause is the urgent existential need for economic diversification.
Right, because the oil won't last forever.
Exactly. They're acutely aware that a pure hydrocarbon-based economy has an expiration date in the 21st century. They desperately need to transition into a logistics, financial, and digital hub.
And what about for India?
For India, the root causes are twofold. First, they must secure reliable energy supplies to fuel an exploding domestic growth rate.
Makes sense.
And second, and perhaps more crucially for the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative, the push for self-reliance in India needs a massive high purchasing power export market for its newly manufactured goods.
Hold on, let me look at the demographic data here, because there is a massive human element to this economic engine, too.
Well, absolutely.
The text notes that the UAE is home to an Indian expatriate community of more than 2.6 million people.
Right.
That is the largest expatriate community in the entire UAE. And the financial impact on India's domestic economy is staggering.
It's huge.
In 2024 alone, Annual remittances from this specific community amounted to over $24.6 billion.
Yeah, 24.6 billion.
2.6 million people remitting $24.6 billion. That is a massive influx of foreign exchange. But here's where I'm trying to reconcile the data with the strategy.
Okay, what's the hang up?
Well, with $24.6 billion in remittances, which traditionally comes from a large blue-collar workforce, right? And then India's heavy reliance on Gulf oil, are we sure this isn't just the same 1970s dynamic of labor and oil, just scaled up?
That's a great question.
I mean, is this actually sustainable for a strategic 21st century partnership?
See, that is the critical vulnerability you always want to look for in any bilateral analysis. Are they stuck in a legacy loop?
Exactly.
But the data from the source indicates a definitive structural pivot. The strategic motivation for both nations is actively shifting away from that pure energy dependence toward high-value manufacturing and digital trade.
Okay, can we track that in the numbers?
We can. We can track this in the specific trade data. Look at the economic implications in the first half of 2025.
Let me pull that up.
Non-oil trade alone stood at $38 billion.
Wow.
Yeah. That represents a 34% year-on-year rise over the first half of 2024.
So if you were listening and trying to remember the true scale of this economic shift for an exam, just lock onto that 34% figure.
Yeah.
First half of 2025, non-oil trade hits $38 billion, a 34% increase. That is the number that proves the diversification strategy isn't just diplomatic rhetoric, right?
Yeah.
It's actually materializing.
It's physical reality.
Yeah, and India's overarching balancing strategy against its massive oil import bill is to rapidly expand its export basket.
Right.
The text details that India's major exports to the UAE now include petroleum products, precious metals, stones, gems and jewelry, minerals, food items, cereals, sugar, tea, seafood, textiles, and importantly, engineering and machinery products and smartphones.
And we have to contrast that with India's major imports from the UAE to really see the balance.
Okay, what are we buying?
India imports petroleum and petroleum products, precious metals, stones, gems and jewelry, minerals, chemicals, and wood products. But look at what is driving that $38 billion non-oil export surge for India.
Right, the gems, machinery, and smartphones.
Exactly. When a nation goes from exporting raw agricultural goods to exporting smartphones and heavy engineering machinery, it signifies an embedding into higher nodes of the global value chain.
It's an upgrade.
It is. It integrates the two economies technologically, not just through raw commodities.
Well, let's pivot slightly to the institutional and legal frameworks required to support all of this. Because when you have 2.6 million expats, a significant portion of whom are blue-collar workers, there is a massive administrative burden.
Huge.
The text explicitly points out that a major focus of bilateral relations is establishing efficient grievance redressal mechanisms for Indian workers in the UAE.
Right.
Now, at first glance, a grievance mechanism sounds like a minor consular detail. Why is this elevated to a core pillar of the strategic text?
Because a labor crisis threatens macroeconomic stability.
Wow, so.
When your diaspora is physically remitting $24.6 billion into your domestic banking system, that money acts as a crucial buffer for foreign exchange reserves,
Right.
Trapping things up. It shores up the domestic economy. If there are systemic labor abuses, wage theft, or sudden mass deportations, it triggers an immediate political and economic crisis back in India.
Oh, I see.
So by institutionalizing robust grievance redressal mechanisms, both states are legally protecting the demographic bedrock of their relationship. They're basically ensuring the remittance pipeline against sudden shocks.
So the traditional blue-collar diaspora is legally protected, maintaining that vital baseline.
Exactly.
But there is a second demographic and economic track operating simultaneously here.
There is.
The source points to a specific memorandum of understanding, an AU, between the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Center, which is known as Shara, and Startup Middle East.
Right.
Their stated objective is launching an India startup hub in Sharjah. But why Sharjah? I mean, we always hear about Dubai or Abu Dhabi. How does this specific hub function in the broader strategic context?
Well, it functions as the bridge to the future digital economy. While Dubai is the traditional commercial center, Sharjah has been aggressively positioning itself as an educational and incubation hub.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so by establishing an India startup hub there, the institutional dimension expands from just managing blue-collar labor to actively integrating white-collar, high-tech entrepreneurship.
A totally different sector.
Exactly. It signals that the future implications of this relationship lie in the digital economy, software, and high-value tech integration.
So we basically have two distinct tracks generating this $100 billion density. The traditional 2.6 million strong diaspora providing labor, and that vital 24.6 billion in remittances managed via those institutional grievance mechanisms.
Right.
And simultaneously, this new frontier of digital and high-value integration pushing that 34% surge in non-oil trade, anchored by initiatives like the Sharjah Startup Hub.
And we really must recognize the geopolitical implications of this massive economic foundation.
Okay, what are they?
By hitting these SEPA targets and elevating the UAE to one of India's absolute largest trading partners globally, India essentially cements a permanent, undeniable footprint in the Middle East.
Because the money is just too big to ignore.
Exactly. You cannot ignore an economic actor moving $100 billion through your region. But, and here's the catch, this brings up the fundamental law of geoeconomics.
Which is?
Deep economic interdependence creates profound vulnerabilities. When you have $100.05 billion in goods and massive energy supplies moving across the sea, you require a robust security architecture to protect it.
Right. Economic integration necessitates security integration.
Precisely.
But before we move to the security apparatus, we cannot gloss over this foundational data. So let's run a rapid revision recap of the economic metrics. I'm going to drill the key figures, and you, the listener, should mentally verify them as we go.
Sounds good.
Okay. The baseline. The creation of the UAE Federation was 1971.
Right.
The starting point for trade in the 1970s was a mere $180 million.
Barely anything.
Exactly. The current scale, total bilateral trade for FY 2024-25, is $100.05 billion.
Huge.
The demographic weight is an Indian expatriate population of 2.6 million, and the financial return of that demographic remittances in 2024 hit $24.6 billion.
Excellent.
Okay, now let's test your active recall. What percentage increase did non-oil trade see in the first half of 2025, and what was the dollar value?
Think about it for a second.
The answer is a 34% rise, hitting $38 billion in H1 2025.
Perfect.
Next question. Which two entities signed the MU to launch the India Startup Hub in Sharjah?
Another crucial detail.
That is the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Center, known as Shira, in Startup Middle East.
Let's synthesize this first pillar into a final revision capsule, because the cause and effect chain operates in a very specific sequence.
Walk us through it.
We begin with a massive expatriate labor force of 2.6 million, which generates $24.6 billion in remittances.
Right, the bedrock.
This demographic base provides the baseline stability required to pursue aggressive trade diversification. That diversification, structurally driven by the CP framework, leads directly to the surge in non-oil trade.
The $38 billion mark.
Exactly, hitting that critical $38 billion mark in H1 2025, specifically with high-value goods like machinery, gems, and smartphones. This physical trade is then augmented by the digital economy, exemplified by the Shira MOU for the Startup Hub.
Makes total sense.
Ultimately, this comprehensive integration ensures the $100 billion SEPA trade target isn't just met, but structurally sustained.
Great. So if you were sitting down to synthesize this into a tight 150-word policy summary for an exam, the core narrative you need to construct goes like this.
Pay attention here.
India-UAE economic relations have transitioned from traditional oil and labor dependence to a diversified high-value partnership.
That's your thesis.
Right. Historically valued at US $180 million in the 1970s, bilateral trade reached US $100.05 billion in FY 2024-25, making UAE one of India's largest trading partners.
We did to drop.
Then you say. This growth is driven by a 34% rise in non-oil trade, hitting US $38 billion in H1 2025, with a focus on gyms, machinery, and smartphones.
Right.
The 2.6 million Indian expatriates contribute profoundly, remitting US $24.6 billion in 2024, necessitating robust grievance redressal mechanisms.
Always tie the demographic to the policy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you wrap it up with, furthermore, institutional linkages like the MU between Shira and Startup Middle East for an India Startup Hub in Sharjah highlight the shift towards digital economy ties, ultimately facilitating India's SEPA objectives.
And if you need to expand that into a full structural analysis, say a 250-word briefing, you want to build it in distinct layers.
How do we structure that?
Well, the opening layer must define the historical context. Start with the 1971 formation of the UAE to show the timeline, and contrast that 1970s $180 million figure with the current scale of US $100.05 billion in FY 24-25.
I've established the growth.
Your first analytical layer should then focus on trade diversification. Detail the export and import baskets, but crucially, highlight the H1 2025 non-oil trade data. That $38 billion, 34% growth metric proves the policy is working.
Then what's layer 2?
Your second analytical layer covers the demographic dividend. Discuss the 2.6 million expats and the 24.6 billion in 2024 remittances. And always tie this to the institutional policy requirement, which is the grievance redressal mechanism.
Oh, right.
The third layer explores the digital and future economy. Explain the Share MOU and the strategic placement of the India Startup Hub in Sharjah.
Got it.
Finally, your concluding layer summarizes how these combined facets achieve the CP targets and lay the necessary groundwork for the strategic and security ties we are about to discuss.
Perfect. And if you just need the rapid-fire bullet points to stick on a flashcard, trade grew from US $180 million in the 1970s to US $100.05 billion in FY 2024-25.
Check.
H1 2025 non-oil trade reached US $38 billion, which is a 34% year-on-year increase.
Right.
The demographic footprint is 2.6 million Indians, generating US $24.6 billion in remittances in 2024. And new frontiers are marked by the India Startup Hub in Sharjah via the Share MOU.
Excellent.
And just to be completely thorough, the keywords you want to mentally underline here are SEPA, non-oil trade, SHARA, grievance redressal, remittances, and H1 2025.
Right.
And this specific administrative terminology you must utilize includes Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, Grievance Redressal Mechanism, Bilateral Trade Volume, and Expatriate Community.
That perfectly establishes the economic bedrock. But, as we noted earlier, an economic corridor of this magnitude absolutely requires physical security to ensure its viability.
It's a huge target otherwise.
Exactly. You cannot have billions of dollars in smartphones, heavy machinery, and critical energy supplies floating across an ocean without a sophisticated architecture to protect it from kinetic threats.
Which naturally drives us into our second structural pillar, the security and defense mainstay.
Right into it.
We are tracking the evolution from the 2017 Comprehensive Strategic Partnership to the highly advanced 2025 Joint Defense Cooperation Committee.
Right.
Let's look at the reality of hard security. Historically, as we established with that $180 million 1970s figure, a Gulf nation and India interacting was just a buyer-seller dynamic.
Very basic.
They loaded the oil, we paid the cash. But the text highlights a July 2025 meeting that suggests a complete structural paradigm shift in how these two militaries interact.
It is a profound institutional shift. And to understand the current operational reality, we really have to establish the strategic background.
Where does it begin?
The text states that a new definitive momentum was injected into the relationship in January 2017. That is when the two sides signed the agreement on a Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, or CSP.
Ah, the CSP.
Right. The 2017 CSP is the moment the relationship officially evolved from transactional to structurally strategic. It expanded the scope of cooperation far beyond just moving goods.
What else did it include?
It suddenly encompassed maritime security, space exploration, civil nuclear energy, defense manufacturing, and deep collaboration between security agencies to fight the global menace of terrorism.
Okay, so January 2017 sets the strategic baseline. But the trigger event for the current, highly integrated state of security cooperation is the 13th Joint Defense Cooperation Committee, or JDCC meeting.
That's the one.
And this took place on July 30, 2025 in New Delhi. The text highlights a crucial institutional and legal dimension here. This 13th JDCC meeting was elevated to the secretary level for the very first time.
And that detail is massive.
Let's decode that administrative terminology for the listener. What does elevating a committee to secretary level actually change in the real world of diplomacy and defense?
In bureaucratic terms, it changes everything. When a committee is handled by lower-level attaches or directors, they are essentially just sharing information and maintaining the status quo.
Just keeping the lights on.
Exactly. They lack the authority to make structural changes. But elevating the JDCC to the secretary level signifies that defense cooperation is no longer a peripheral or routine topic. It is a core top-tier priority for the highest levels of both governments.
Because they have the power to actually do things.
Yes. Secretaries have the institutional weight to cut through red tape, allocate significant budgets, and authorize major strategic shifts.
And the root causes pushing this institutional elevation are deeply tied to the geoeconomics we just discussed. Right?
Absolutely.
Both nations face a mutual urgent need to secure the sea lanes of communication in the Indian Ocean region, the IOR.
Right.
Furthermore, the UAE has a very specific strategic motivation right now. It is actively seeking to diversify its defense partnerships away from its traditional Western anchors.
Yes, that's a key point.
I mean, the global architecture is fracturing, multipolarity is the reality, and India presents a highly capable, non-aligned alternative for the UAE to partner with.
Let's examine the specific stakeholders and objectives operating within this newly elevated security architecture.
Who's involved?
The source explicitly names the Indian Coast Guard and the UAE National Guard as the primary operational bodies. They have established formal joint maritime safety agreements.
Okay.
Alongside that, there are ongoing high-level discussions for tri-service engagements, meaning Army to Army, Navy to Navy, and Air Force to Air Force interactions.
Oh, wow. Full integration.
Yeah, the overarching objective across all these domains is absolute interoperability and the enforcement of regional maritime safety.
We need to look at the exact security implications that the text says resulted from that July 30, 2025 JDCC meeting.
Right, the concrete outcomes.
The key outcomes focus heavily on the maritime domain. They agreed on search and rescue operations, or SAR. They agreed on joint anti-piracy operations. They agreed on pollution response.
Crucial for oil routes.
Exactly. And crucially, they agreed on real-time information sharing between the Indian Coast Guard and the UAE National Guard. Now, real-time info sharing sounds great in a diplomatic press release, but well, what does it actually require mechanically?
Mechanically, real-time information sharing is incredibly difficult to achieve.
Why is that?
Because it requires absolute institutional trust. It means integrating communication networks, sharing encrypted data streams, and overcoming the natural paranoia that intelligence and military agencies inherently possess.
Right, they don't like to share.
Exactly. So when a UAE radar picks up an anomalous vessel movement, that data is instantly populating on a screen in an Indian Coast Guard command center.
That's a huge leap.
It is. That is the hallmark of a mature structural security alliance. It allows them to preempt threats rather than just reacting to them.
And the economic implications of those specific operations, like anti-piracy, SAR, pollution response, are massive.
Huge.
These are the physical mechanisms that protect the $100 billion trade routes. I mean, you cannot sustain $38 billion in non-oil trade moving highly valuable cargo if the sea lanes are vulnerable to piracy or if a major maritime disaster closes a port.
You just can't.
The joint defense architecture is literally ensuring their shared industrial revenue streams.
Furthermore, it is creating entirely new revenue streams. The text explicitly notes that discussions are underway on joint defense manufacturing.
Wait, manufacturing?
Yeah, this is a quantum leap from a buyer-seller relationship. Joint manufacturing means shared intellectual property, integrated supply chains, and intertwined industrial bases.
That's deep.
It is. And the text also points to advanced training cooperation, specifically Indian customized courses for UAE personnel.
Indian customized courses for UAE personnel. That means the Indian military establishment is actively shaping the operational doctrine, the tactics, and the capabilities of UAE forces.
Exactly.
The impact on India's strategic posture is significant. It decisively secures its western maritime flank. By embedding the UAE into its regional security architecture through these tri-service engagements and joint manufacturing hubs, India establishes a powerful anchor in the Gulf.
Right.
And they are doing this masterfully without alienating their other strategic partners in the Middle East.
And the geopolitical implications are profound. This integration fundamentally enhances India's footprint across the Indian Ocean region and the wider Middle East maritime domain.
Definitely.
The source text concludes this section with a very specific phrase. The defense dimension is increasingly becoming a mainstay of the comprehensive strategic partnership.
A mainstay.
Right. Mainstay implies it is no longer an add-on, it is the load-bearing pillar. This marks a definitive qualitative shift from purely trade-focused interactions to integrated strategic military engagement.
Okay, let's run a rapid revision recap of this crucial defense data before we move to the global implications. I will lay out the markers, you lock them in.
Go for it.
The trigger event that created this strategic mandate. The January 2017 Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, or CSP.
Right.
The recent institutional milestone. the 13th JDCC meeting on July 30, 2025 in New Delhi.
Very important date.
The key maritime stakeholders involved: the Indian Coast Guard and the UAE National Guard, and the primary operational focus areas: search and rescue, SAR anti-piracy, real-time information sharing, and joint defense manufacturing.
Spot on.
Now let's hit the active recall questions. What specific bureaucratic level was the 13th JDCC meeting elevated to on July 30, 2025?
Think about the institutional weight.
The answer is the secretary level, for the very first time.
Right.
Next, which two specific maritime forces signed the safety agreements to operationalize anti-piracy and real-time info sharing?
The maritime actors.
That is the Indian Coast Guard and the UAE National Guard.
Excellent. So to cement this in your structural understanding, here is the final revision capsule for the security and defense pillar.
Let's hear it.
The evolution here is linear and deliberate. It begins with the 2017 CSP, which provides the overarching legal and strategic mandate. This mandate lies somewhat dormant until it matures into the July 2025 Secretary-level JDCC meeting. That specific meeting operationalizes the mandate through concrete, physical agreements on real-time info sharing and SAR between the respective Coast Guards.
Making it real.
Exactly. The ultimate result is a robust, integrated framework capable of securing the Indian Ocean region while establishing joint defense manufacturing as a literal mainstay of the bilateral relationship.
So if you are synthesizing this into a 150-word policy summary, your framework is: the India-UAE defense relationship underwent a paradigm shift with the 2017 Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, or CSP, evolving from a transactional trade tie to a structural security alliance.
Strong opening.
Thanks. Thank you, Say. This was cemented during the 13th Joint Defense Cooperation Committee, or JDCC, meeting on July 30, 2025 in New Delhi, elevated to the secretary level for the first time.
Right.
Key outcomes include maritime safety agreements between the Indian Coast Guard and UAE National Guard, focusing on search and rescue, anti-piracy, and real-time information sharing.
Hit those domains.
Yep. Furthermore, discussions on joint defense manufacturing and customized training for UAE forces illustrate that defense is now a mainstay of the CSP.
Use the text's words.
Exactly. And to conclude, this alignment secures India's maritime interests in the Indian Ocean region, the IOR, and reflects a shared vision for regional security architecture and counterterrorism.
Perfect. Now, for a deeper 250-word structural analysis, you build it out like this.
Okay, layers again.
Right. Your opening layer introduces the January 2017 CSP as the definitive catalyst. You must explicitly state that this shifted the baseline away from mere trade and into comprehensive defense cooperation.
Got it.
Your first analytical layer covers the institutional milestones. Detail the 13th JDCC meeting on July 30, 2025 in New Delhi, and heavily emphasize its historic elevation to the secretary level as the proof of political will.
Okay, layer 2.
Your second layer focuses on the maritime and operational domains. Explain the specific agreements between the Indian Coast Guard and the UAE National Guard, listing the operational mechanics, SAR, anti-piracy, pollution response, and real-time information sharing.
And the third layer.
Your third layer delves into the strategic depth. Discuss the long-term structural projects, joint defense manufacturing, tri-service engagements across the Army, Navy, and Air Force, and the customized training courses for UAE personnel.
Nice.
And finally, your concluding layer assesses the broader geopolitical impact. Summarize how these initiatives physically secure the IOR, signal a tight alignment on regional security, and establish defense as the mainstay of bilateral ties.
Awesome. And for the rapid recall flashcard bullets, the 2017 CSP initiated strategic military engagement.
Check.
The 13th JDCC on July 30, 2025 in New Delhi was elevated to the secretary level.
Right.
Formal agreements were established between the Indian Coast Guard and the UAE National Guard. The operational focus is entirely on SAR, anti-piracy, and real-time information sharing.
Crucial mechanic.
And the relationship is now expanding into joint defense manufacturing and customized military training.
Yeah.
Your key words to underline for this section are 13th JDCC, Secretary level, Indian Coast Guard, UAE National Guard, SAR, Indian Ocean Region, and CSP.
Right.
And the specific administrative terminology you must utilize includes Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, Joint Defense Cooperation Committee, Maritime Security Architecture, and Real-Time information sharing.
Okay, so we have established a massive economic foundation, currently pushing $100 billion, driven by deep demographic ties.
Right.
We have analyzed the sophisticated secretary-level security architecture designed to protect that economic density.
Yes, we have.
Now we have to elevate our analysis to the macro level. We must examine how these two pillars enable a global strategy.
This brings us to our third structural pillar: geopolitics, connectivity, and multilateralism.
Right.
Because if we are building an architecture to secure the waters of the IOR, the next logical question is, what are we moving through those waters and where are we ultimately connecting? This requires bridging the domestic and bilateral focus onto the wider global chessboard. And here's where the source text introduces a really fascinating geographical anomaly.
It really does.
It details an alignment on infrastructure and connectivity, stating specifically that India and the UAE jointly agreed to develop an energy hub in Trincomalee, which is in Sri Lanka.
Right.
Let's pause there. India and the UAE are partnering in a third country, thousands of miles away from the Gulf.
Yeah.
Why are they pooling resources in Sri Lanka? I mean, the text notes this highlights cooperation outside direct bilateral interaction to address China's influence. How does this specific mechanism of multilateralism actually work?
Well, multilateralism is the strategy of the future.
Why is that?
Because multilateral organizations like the UN or the WTO are increasingly gridlocked, and bilateral ties are sometimes too narrow to affect regional change.
Right, they have limits.
So multilateralism brings together a small, targeted group of nations, in this case, India, the UAE, and Sri Lanka, to pool specific capabilities for a specific objective.
What does everyone bring to the table?
The UAE brings massive capital and energy expertise. India brings geographical proximity, manpower, and regional security frameworks. And Sri Lanka provides the strategic real estate at Trincomalee.
Ah, I see.
The root cause for venturing into this third country is the strategic necessity to build resilient global supply chains and counter unilateral regional dominance in the Indian Ocean. They are physically anchoring their shared interests in strategic geography to check China's influence.
So Trincomalee in Sri Lanka is transformed from a local port into a geopolitical node.
Exactly.
The stakeholders India, the UAE, and Sri Lanka are aligned on the objective of seamless energy connectivity. And the geopolitical implications here are massive. India is actively utilizing the financial heft of the UAE to secure its immediate neighborhood.
But the strategy extends far beyond the Indian Ocean.
Right.
The text explicitly states that the UAE's role as a vital hub for India's greater Gulf Africa-West Asia connectivity strategy is growing rapidly. India is leveraging the UAE to achieve supply chain diversification and vast geopolitical reach.
The strategic motivation driving this expansion is the desire to transition the partnership from purely transactional to deeply structural, right?
Yeah.
They are establishing reliable physical and economic alternatives to existing trade bottlenecks. And the ultimate physical manifestation of this structural shift, the macro trigger event that ties this entire geopolitical pillar together, is the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, or IMS.
The IMS agreement.
Yes, the text lists the key institutional signatories to this massive geopolitical infrastructure project. The UAE, along with India, Saudi Arabia, the EU, and Israel. Both India and the UAE are founding stakeholders.
Right.
Let's look at the exact geography detailed in the source for the IMS route because the logistics are just staggering.
Walk us through it.
The text specifies that the UAE serves as the crucial maritime link. The physical nodes for this corridor are the Fujairah, Jebel Ali, and Abu Dhabi ports.
Okay, those are the ports.
Right. From those ports, the text outlines the plan to establish a rail link between the Fujairah port in the UAE and the Haifa port in Israel.
Let's trace that conceptually.
Yeah. Goods travel by sea from India to the UAE ports of Fujairah, Jebel Ali, and Abu Dhabi. Then, they are offloaded onto a proposed rail network that cuts straight across the Arabian Peninsula, landing at the Haifa port in Israel.
Right.
And from there, across the Mediterranean to Europe. That is a massive logistical and geopolitical challenge. Why take that on instead of just sailing through the Suez Canal like the global economy have done for over a century?
Because the Suez Canal and the Red Sea have proven to be profound strategic vulnerabilities.
Yeah, we've seen that recently.
Exactly. We are living in an era of weaponized supply chains and asymmetric maritime threats. A single blocked canal or regional instability can paralyze global trade.
It's too fragile.
Right. So the IMEEC route is an exercise in applied geoeconomics. The economic implications are a massive boost to trade efficiency, radically altering Eurasian trade maps by reducing transit times.
Speed is money.
Yes. But the security implications are even more transformative. It secures energy lifelines and supply chains entirely independent of those vulnerable maritime choke points. By routing a railway from Fujairah to Haifa, you create strategic autonomy.
Wow. The text summarizes the implication of this entire connectivity section with a very definitive policy phrase.
What is it?
It says this structural evolution positions India and the UAE as partners of choice in each other's long-term regional and global outlooks.
Partners of choice.
Yeah. India leverages the UAE to reach Africa and West Asia and to build the IMEEC corridor to Europe. Simultaneously, the UAE leverages India to diversify its supply chains, access a massive consumer market, and secure a highly capable defense partner in the IOR.
It is a perfect structural lock.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do our rapid revision recap for this final pillar. I'm going to drill the geography because you must know these specific nodes.
Pay close attention to these locations.
The joint energy hub designed to counter regional influence is located in Trincomalee, Sri Lanka.
Right.
The three crucial UAE ports explicitly named for the IMEC corridor are Fujairah, Jebel Ali, and Abu Dhabi ports.
Yep.
The planned IMS rail link connects the Fujairah port in the UAE to the Haifa port in Israel. And the key signatories to the IMS agreement mentioned in the text are India, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, the EU, and Israel.
Got it.
Let's run the active recall. Which three UAE ports are named as the crucial maritime links in the IMS agreement?
Think back to the C nodes.
The answer is Fujairah, Jebel Ali, and Abu Dhabi ports.
Right.
Next, in which Sri Lankan city are India and the UAE jointly developing an energy hub to address China's influence?
The Millennium-old project.
The answer is Trincomalee.
Here is your final revision capsule for the geopolitics and connectivity pillar.
Break it down.
The macro-strategic synthesis relies entirely on viewing the UAE as the indispensable anchor of India's western flank.
Right.
This anchor facilitates power projection through unilateralism evidenced directly by the joint ventures in Sri Lanka, specifically the Trincomalee hub, which serves as a physical counter to China's regional influence.
Okay.
Simultaneously, this anchor enables macro connectivity through the IMEC architecture, linking the ports of Fujairah, Jebel Ali, and Abu Dhabi to Haifa via rail.
The big bypass.
Exactly. The culmination of these efforts is a definitive shift from bilateral transactions to structural geopolitics, physically redefining supply chain diversification for the 21st century.
Awesome. So if you need to write a concise 150-word policy summary on this geopolitical pillar, frame it like this. India and the UAE have transformed their bilateral ties into a broader geopolitical tool, establishing multilateral partnerships to secure supply chains and counter regional hegemony.
Strong start.
Right. A prime example is their joint agreement with Sri Lanka to develop an energy hub in Trincomalee, strategically addressing China's influence in the Indian Ocean.
Good specific detail.
Furthermore, the UAE acts as the linchpin for India's Gulf Africa-West Asia connectivity strategy. Both nations are crucial signatories to the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, or IMEC, alongside Saudi Arabia, the EU, and Israel.
Name the actors.
Exactly. Within IMEC, the UAE provides vital maritime nodes through Fujairah, Jebel Ali, and Abu Dhabi ports, intending to establish a transformative rail link from Fujairah to Israel's Haifa port.
Perfect.
And the conclusion. This structural alignment cements the UAE as India's partner of choice for long-term supply chain diversification and strategic autonomy.
Now, to construct a comprehensive 250-word structural analysis, your opening layer must define the multi-domain nature of the strategic partnership. Explain clearly that the relationship now reaches far beyond bilateral borders into space, digital, and global connectivity frameworks.
Okay, layer one down.
Your first analytical layer focuses on countering regional dominance. Discuss the Trincomalee, Sri Lanka Energy Hub project. Analyze its strategic intent regarding addressing China's influence in the IOR through joint multilateral action.
And layer two.
Your second layer covers IMS and geoeconomics. Detail the key IMS signatories. You must explicitly list the specific geographical nodes, the Fujairah, Jebel Ali, and Abu Dhabi ports, and explain the planned rail link connecting Fujairah to the Haifa port.
Then the final layer.
Your third layer broadens the scope to the Western flank strategy. Explain how India leverages the UAE as a critical hub for greater Gulf Africa-West Asia connectivity and essential supply chain diversification.
I'll wrap it up.
Exactly. Your concluding layer summarizes how these minilateral and multilateral initiatives definitively shift the partnership from transactional to structural, ensuring long-term geopolitical reach for both nations.
For the rapid recall bullet points. Joint energy hub development in Trincomalee, Sri Lanka, explicitly addresses China's regional influence.
Check.
The UAE serves as the critical hub for India's Gulf Africa-West Asia connectivity strategy.
Right.
The key IMS signatories include India, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, the EU, and Israel. And the IM route relies on Fujairah, Jebel Ali, and Abu Dhabi ports, featuring a transformative rail link to Haifa port.
Excellent.
The keywords to mentally underline here are Trincomalee, IM, Fujairah, Jebel Ali, Haifa port, supply chain diversification, and multilateral link.
Got it.
The administrative and policy terminology you must master includes geoeconomics, supply chain diversification, multilateral cooperation, economic corridor, and strategic connectivity.
So when we step back and look at the entirety of the source text, a profound, unified cause and effect chain emerges.
It really does all tie together.
It does. We started with the foundational demographic reality. 2.6 million Indian expats generating $24.6 billion in remittances, protected by institutional grievance mechanisms.
The bedrock.
Right. That human and financial bridge facilitated an environment of deep trust, which enabled a massive economic boom hitting the $100.05 billion CEPA target. And that was driven by a 34% surge in non-oil trade to $38 billion in the first half of 2025 alone.
And that immense economic density, that $100 billion vulnerability floating on the ocean necessitated the hard security integration we analyzed in the second pillar. The July 2025 13th JDCC meeting, elevating to the secretary level, the Coast Guard and National Guard maritime safety agreements, the complex mechanics of real-time info sharing, the push for joint defense manufacturing, all of it exists to secure the economic engine.
Deep economic and demographic ties necessitate mutual security architectures.
Right.
And once you have a secured economic engine, a locked-in structural partnership, it empowers both nations to project stability outward.
Which takes us to the global stage.
Exactly. That leads directly to the global geopolitical footprint we analyzed in the third pillar. Countering regional influence via multilateralism at the Trincomalee Energy Hub, and fundamentally redefining global trade routes through the IMS corridor from Fujairah to Haifa.
Economic interdependence bred security integration.
Which in turn enabled massive geopolitical multilateralism.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought based on the sheer structural ambition outlined in this text.
Let's hear it.
We see how quickly the 13th JDCC elevated to the secretary level in July 2025 to secure these maritime routes.
Yeah.
We see the highly ambitious scope of the planned Fujairah to Haifa port rail link under the IMS framework.
Right.
But what happens to this deeply integrated bilateral synergy if there is an unexpected geopolitical shock in the broader Middle East?
It's a volatile region.
It is. How resilient is a structural partnership when the physical geography around its most ambitious connectivity corridors violently shifts? That is the strategic dilemma you must mull over as you analyze the future trajectory of this relationship.
Something to really think about.
Definitely. Revise the frameworks we built today, memorize the precise geographic nodes, and lock in the data points. Your strategic briefing is complete.